Welcome, everyone. This is the Morbid Symptoms podcast, and I'm very happy to say that Garrett from the Social Populist, which is which is at Substack.com, is joining us again to continue our conversation about debating Palestinian resistance, the left, and socialism, to condemn or not to condemn. The first time we were on, we looked at this topic in reference to the Control Zone episode on Sublation Media that was entitled "Hamas, the Left, and Socialism," where Catron was very critical, and it was quite clear that he didn't think that the left or the socialism or the left more broadly, which of course is conclude other ideas besides socialism, should have anything to do with Hamas, so that should be condemned and etc. We're here. We didn't get to finish with that review of his episode, or our debate with that episode, you could say. And also, since that time, Ashley Frawley, who also is a part of Sublation Media and Sublation Magazine, I believe she's the editor at large, but I'm not sure. But she is an editor there, and she also has, I think, a weekly or almost weekly podcast on Sublation Media. She had an article that was released yesterday or today on the progressive nihilism, but she also she's also very critical of the left or parts of the left who do not have anything to do with Hamas, and she's finds this very disturbing. The number of people on the left who aren't outright condemning Hamas unequivocally, if I can synthesize that in her words in that way. So what we're going to do today is we're going to go over Ashley Fowley's essay in Compact Magazine and give a real-time analysis. I read over it once and I quickly shot it off to Garrett and I said, Garrett, I think we're going to want to I think this will give us this will be a good prompt, so to say, a good provocation to talk on this theme, because it seems that, Garrett and I aren't exactly on the same page, but we are, our position is opposed to, and let me know in a minute if I'm putting words in your mouth, Garrett, that our position is quite different from Chris Catron's and Ashley Fowley's, such as we've been able to determine. And what I want to make sure is that not condemning something is not the same as celebrating it in the streets. And also understanding and contextualizing things that happen is also not the same as celebrating them or enabling gross disregard for human life, which is something that lots of people are guilty of, I should say, for a very long time, but we can get on that later.
Indeed.
Anyway, that's enough of my ongoing introduction. Garrett, do you want to say anything before we jump into Dr. Frawley's interesting take on the current situation in Israel, Palestine, and vis-a-vis the left?
I think you've set it up pretty well.
Okay, good. Okay, so let's bring this up and see what she has to what she's scolding us, because we should keep in mind that I don't know. Again, we'll get to it. Okay. So again, for people listening to this maybe later, I'm going to read not all of Ashley's essay, but probably about 70% of it. And I'm not sharing the screen because I'm not sure of the copyright issues and whatnot. Although, if anybody's listening from that fine publication, I am a paid. I am a subscriber, so I didn't bootleg this, but I did make my own slides. Okay, so here's the first paragraph. So the new progressive nihilism. Since the dawn of the modern age, the conquest of disease and death has been a central dimension of progressive optimism. Modern thought has long dreamed of the day when the human lifespan would know no upper limit. When, as Condorcet put it, nature has fixed no limits to our hopes. Declining infant mortality, increasing life expectancy, and a growing arsenal of cures for once deadly illnesses have encouraged these hopes. Doesn't she sound like a liberal utopian already? She's a Marxist. Oh, wait. Or so-called Marxist, perhaps. Declining infant mortality rate. Okay. To be sure, the dream of life extension sometimes mutates into a hubristic denial that death and dying are a part of life, as with the transhumanist fantasies that captivate many of Silicon Valley's techno-optimists. Nonetheless, as the philosopher Martin Hegland has argued, the conviction that no life can ever be complete is closely linked to the broader modern conception of progress. I have additional response to this, but given that I know that this is a pretext to attacking Hamas and the people who didn't condemn them.
Yeah, I think this is just a setup to, to where she's actually going. I mean, I don't think there's a major dispute here.
No, although I think it's interesting that optimism. There's something. I mean, there's been some critique about kind of fetishizing progress and this idea of that. It's kind of interesting.
Well, she qualified that by bringing up the transhumanist thing. I mean, that is the danger of the techno optimism, of the progressive the progressive optimism thing. So I think she's covered herself there.
That's true. Go ahead.
She's hit us with something indisputable to kind of get our guard down.
Yeah.
I think.
Like, well, I'm against the conquest of disease. Yeah, although it's kind of the life expectancy is going down in the United States, though.
Right.
And maybe some other places as well. I don't know, but so okay, but it's fine. So there's just like yeah, I would also agree.
But I think her point is though that a lot on the left don't worry about those things as much as they ought to, other than the left populists who are her audience at Compact.
All right, so let's see. So we have this. So this is obviously going to set up a contrast. So we have progressive optimism, progress. A lot of focus on improving life, so curing diseases and increasing the lifespan and this type of thing. Okay, so let's see. As progressive optimism declined, so did the notion that politics could reach for something beyond itself. In its place has been substituted a progressive nihilism. So this will be her main argument, that we've been this progressive. So progressive optimism has been replaced by something she's calling progressive nihilism. In the late 20th century, the vanishing of utopian horizon left only a politics of subversion in which disruption became the end in itself. Think of the carnivals against capitalism of the late 1990s and early aughts. Why would disruption? Do you have something to say?
This, I think, is where she starts to go off the rails, frankly, because I remember those. I mean, the very fact that they were carnivalistic had a utopian aspect to it. They were largely run by anarchists who are utopian socialists, as opposed to the more, realists, materialists of the Marxist schools. Particularly the orthodox Marxist schools. So, but it wasn't disruption for its own sake. I mean, this is a straw man.
Yeah, she's putting a gloss on it. Obviously, she's putting a gloss on it. We're just going to take her at her word.
They openly called them carnivals, and they called them street theater. I mean, I guess the carnivalistic aspect maybe suggests that they are for their own sake, that they are, sensually gratifying, et cetera, et cetera. Well, but again, she's saying she's associating nihilism with courting death, but obviously
that comes later.
Having a carnival is not courting death; it's a celebration of life. And most of these people were, the anarchists were. Most of them were pacifists, actually. I mean, there was a black bloc contingent that was more militant, but many of them were pacifists, and they were trying to celebrate life at the same time they were celebrating political engagement. So
Are you
it doesn't fit at
suggesting
all.
maybe talking about things that she doesn't really know that much about? Is that what you're suggesting, Garrett?
I am suggesting that. I mean, I haven't seen the link that she puts there as her source, but I know quite a bit about carnivals against capitalism from experience and reading.
It's through a website, by the way. I remind everybody. Okay, nothing wrong with websites, people. So, okay, so here we go. Well, and also I know, because I know where she's going with this, but it's the idea that disruption is one of the things, maybe one of the only things that people who don't have, well, I don't want to say powerless, but like if you want to say even the proletariat or the working class or the poor or the occupied, occupied people, disruption is one of the only things that they have. They don't get to make the rules. They often don't get access to places that recognize their equal rights. They also don't have militaries and lots of, I mean, it's this kind of, to me, but we'll see.
Yeah, no, I mean, this is ahistorical. This is for people who don't know anything, not only about the reasoning behind recent activist movements, but behind historical activist movements. Mm-hmm. I can't believe she's this stupid, frankly.
Well,
she's trying to capitalize. She's either very ignorant or she's trying to capitalize on other people's ignorance. I'm very suspicious.
I think she's using this as a pretext to continue on with the topic of her latest book, is my guess. So anything you can, any kind of grist for the mill, you can apply to that. I mean, I don't know, obviously. I'm just, because she's a very intelligent person. Yeah. And she's also empathic. And, I've been, I don't know her personally, but I've probably, I can't remember. It was before COVID, I think. I saw her on, there was some RT show, Renegade Inc. or something. I don't know. So anyway.
And she professes to be a Marxist.
Yes. I would say, yeah, I mean, I wouldn't say that's the only thing she is, but she's, yeah, if you're going to put, yeah, I mean, I would say that she's yeah, yes. As far as I know, yes. And here we go. But I think she would probably say that as well. But I think she's just trying to say like that there's just like a new emphasis. So where it used to be this new disruption for disruption's sake, and she would probably say that if you're disrupting, she's going to have us make a distinction between disruption that's for a larger purpose beyond the disruption, and then just disruption just to whatever, just to burn things down or massacre people apparently or whatever. But let's see where she's going here. Why would disruption for its own sake come to be seen as progressive? Okay. So we have a progressive nihilism, this idea that disruption as such is progressive. Okay. Because the idea emerged that whatever perpetuates the existence of a politically unsalvageable world, consciously or not, is morally suspect. Families that reproduce patriarchy, institutions laden with racism and sexism and so on, are all complicit in the perpetuation of a system that must be brought down. Ordinary people going about their lives are also complicit and deserve to be disrupted. Hence the tactics of climate activists who blockade roads and prevent commuters from getting to work. But within the capitalist realist framework that there is no alternative, there is no faith in a better future. All that is left then is an endless politics of resistance, not overcoming, not creating, but resisting, subverting, disrupting. Are you convinced? I would say, I'll just jump in here before you jump in. I would say there is this idea that anything new is progressive, or that any norm that you queer or tear down or deconstruct as such, that makes it progressive. And I would say, of course, yeah, I would have an issue with that. I also think,
but that's part of utopianism.
Yeah. Okay. So go ahead.
Part of utopianism and nihilism have always been two sides of the same coin. Mm-hmm. And Marxism is supposed to be against both of them.
Okay.
The anarchists were simultaneously nihilistic and utopian.
Mm-hmm. Can you say a bit more about that?
I don't know. It would just seem to be.
I mean, you could tear down all. Go ahead.
It would seem to be self-evident, from the nihilists of under Tsarist Russia,
Mm-hmm.
who wanted to completely restart the society, and were willing to sacrifice their own lives and to sacrifice the lives of civilians.
Mm-hmm.
But I mean, the anarchist concept is utopian, at least on the left side of it, is that human nature is so benign that we don't need government, we don't need laws, that the natural state of humanity is cooperation. And not just in the long term, as Marxists would have it, that the state will wither away and we will gradually learn to be a fully cooperative species again, but that we can do this virtually overnight. As soon as if the state falls, immediately, we'll start to get back to this state of benevolent human nature.
Very romantic, then.
Right. Now, with that said, you do have to distinguish the ideology from the tactics, and you also disruption. There are all different types of disruption, ranging from Martin Luther King, who openly talked about disruption and the necessity of disruption for the greater good. And even the practice of the founding fathers with the Boston Tea Party and the Boston Massacre, etc. From that to, I don't know. I don't want to say Osama bin Laden, but at least Ted Kaczynski, to go back to anarchists. I mean, it could be anything from nonviolent civil disobedience, shutting down a road, with a sort of soft lockdown where you could negotiate the passage of the ambulances or the emergency vehicles or whatever, to blowing up a road or blowing up some infrastructure. Disruption could mean all of those things. And you can't just categorically denounce all of them at one time. So this just seems like straw man stuff.
Yeah,
not very serious.
Well, and also there's there's people who will, again, when you mentioned like the how people talk and how they like to see themselves and what they actually do, because there's a lot of people who sound really radical online, but they live very straight lives. They go to work, they have kids, we're totally in the system because there's so few parallel institutional options that it's not like we can, only a few people can go live off the grid or who want to. So people, it's kind of lots of people think they're revolutionary, aren't anarchists or Marxists or whatever. But if you were to spend a couple of days with them, you would find that, this doesn't seem very revolutionary to me at all. And I would agree with the thing with the climate activist blockade. My point with them is that their information is bad.
Yeah.
So that
I
they're
agree.
asking that aren't possible and that aren't that can't be done.
No, not while preserving, modern civilization.
Yeah,
I don't think the green technologies are ready for prime time.
Well, they're not. I mean, what's showing is, unless they're going to start embracing nuclear, it's like they don't know. So just as a side note, that from the information that is that about 20% of, let's say 20% of global energy use is electricity, 21%. And so windmills produce electricity, solar panels do, but 80% of our energy needs, which isn't just electricity, come from other sources. And so we're used to 24/7 power, and you're never going to get that, ever going to get it with wind.
Never going to get it.
Even if you enslave everybody in anywhere there's cobalt and do nothing but mine cobalt every hour of the day, it's not going to work. Now, if you really want to make a dent in fossil fuel use, then you go to nuclear. But they hate that. That's like the devil. And they all think that nothing has progressed since Chernobyl. I mean, it's just
right.
So it's like
completely ignoring France and
And so it's just kind of if so that's my thing is their tactics. I mean, it just seems like painting, gluing yourself to a Van Gogh painting, or or blocking or refusing to get up if someone's in labor. There's a hospital an ambulance trying to get in the hospital. I get that. I get people's aversion to it, but my main thing is that they're just wrong. What they're asking for,
I agree. It's more the substance
they're
to the
asking
form.
for disastrous. and impossible. So, I mean, it's one thing to ask for what seems impossible, like, healthcare for all in the United States, when it actually is possible. It just is there's a difference between being politically unlikely and being like, no, you would, that would be really bad for a lot of people if they were to do what you, and again, it's so, yeah, but I think what we want to put a pin in here is when she says for what comes next, is she says ordinary people going
but also
about.
let me just say that
Go
strikes,
ahead.
all strikes are disruptive. Classical
Yeah.
labor strikes are disruptive. They do risk alienating the
She
public.
would have a point, though. She would say they would have a particular point, which is
But
this is just
that's
this is just punishment. She's like, this is just to punish people who they, yeah.
But that's conflating the tactics with the cause.
Yeah.
The problem with the climate activists, I think, is that their cause and their demands are not very good.
They're evangelical now, almost.
Yeah.
Mother Earth is dying and we're killing her, and it's like, okay. Anyway, yeah. So we'll see. So there's no alternative. Okay. All that's left is an endless politics of resistance, not overcoming, not creating, but resisting, subverting, disrupting. All right. Okay, Ashley, where are we going next? Okay. Ooh, now I need to get this thing out of here. Go away. The radical politics of subversion also informed the immediate instinctive sympathy felt on the progressive left with Hamas listen to this quote, with Hamas terrorists rather than Israeli civilians. So already she's following the line of how Hamas is terrorists. They're not. It's so, which of course they were labeled as that by Israel. I think obviously probably during the Second Intifada, maybe before, maybe around 2001. And of course, if you label them a terrorist, then of course you don't have to think anything past that. It depoliticizes it, it dehistoricizes it, it rationalizes extreme military action against them and the Palestinians in Gaza en masse. But whatever. So she agrees that Hamas are terrorists, and rather than Israeli civilians. Wasn't Hamas's onslaught the ultimate act of subversion that burst through the banality of day-to-day life with a dramatic spectacle? No. The victims were disrupted amid their everyday routines. Their complicity with an oppressive system was subverted. Mass slaughter, the ultimate disruption, the ultimate carnival against capitalism. Okay, so my response was that if she had written this on the first week, and she for some reason hasn't developed any skepticism about what regular news outlets and what government officials say about Israel and what Israel says about the Palestinians and Hamas, which is what I've found, and others much, who've been following this much closer than I have found that when it comes to Palestinians and Hamas, Israel lies. They lie all the time. Crazy lies, small lies, big lies, 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 lies. And that, of course, the United States is going to back them up. They're going to usually share the narrative. Sometimes they get irritated about, every once in a while they get upset about, the rate of illegal settlements, but basically they agree. They toe the line, and the line has been since 2004, I guess, or 2006, whatever, that Israel has a quote unquote right to defend itself. Hamas is terrorists and like Islamic terrorism, whatever. And they just have this irrational hatred of Jewish people. And so that's why Hamas does the things that it does. It's like, all right. But if she had taken them at their word that they just broke out and that the order was just kill whoever you come across, there was no plan, no nothing. Just if we break out one day, we're just going to kill whoever we come across. That was the idea. Then I could see this thing. But what we know So she's just parroting here Israel's narrative of what happened on October 7th.
I
So
concur.
Hamas, yeah. Sorry?
I agree.
Yeah. So basically, just to recap, so Hamas are terrorists, therefore, and they just whenever they can, they'll just randomly kill as many Jewish people as possible, and that was just basically it. And the goal is just to disrupt the Emid, their everyday routines, because they're complicit with an oppressive system. Now, this I want to connect back to when she said that this disruption is progressive and disrupting people who are just trying to get about, who are I guess you could say innocent, who aren't really involved in this. And so what I would say to that is that first of all, Scott Ritter and other people. So I should put that on the bottom here, my little banner of people who write books and investigate this journalistically. Okay, so the people on the bottom are people who are podcast journalists, authors, researchers who cover Israel, Palestine, and the greater Middle East and geopolitics, etc. The critical eye, past the, to use an old Foxism, the no spin zones or reduced spin. Anyway, but also Scott Ritter, who basically he had an article that said that Hamas's raid was on October 7th. They conducted a classical military raid, the most successful one this century. So basically, my understanding is of a military raid is so you go into enemy territory with certain objectives. So you go in, you do those objectives as much as you can, and then you come back. And they also were quite clear. Not that Ashley bothered finding out what the Hamas official statements were on Alaska floods and what they did that day and why they did it, or other people reporting on the situation. Again, she doesn't have to take their word for it, but you would think you would be like, why did they do that? What was the point of this? Was it just to have a mass slaughter? Or was there because again, she says that there's no politics, it's just about disrupting. And that is false when it comes to this. So Hamas, their explicit thing was what they wanted to disrupt the Abraham Accords from going through, because Saudi Arabia was on the pathway to normalizing relations with Israel. And if anyone looks at the Abraham Accords, it's basically the death to any kind of Palestinian state, one state, two state, green state, whatever state. It's just basically makes it basically an impossibility. And of course, they weren't a part of those negotiations. This was a Trump era policy, I think. So they wanted to disrupt that. They did not want. They felt that according to them, if Saudi Arabia and Israel normalized relations, then that would be the end of, that would be very bad for their cause, which is to overthrow or to end Israeli occupation, to have a Palestinian state. That's their expressed goal since I think about 2008 or so. Anyway, so that was one thing. They wanted to disrupt that. Second of all, they want Israel to stop defacing the Dome of the Mount, which is the third most holiest site in Islam. And Israel does go out of its way to does not respect that as
defacing it and beating the shit out of the people worshiping there.
Yeah. They basically can do whatever they want, and also they have. They're again the majority of the people who would be patrolling that mosque, or who are dealing with checkpoints, are like teenagers. They're between like 18 and 21, and they are given a gun and basically told to, that they're the Übermensch, for example, and the Palestinians are the Untermensch, and they can do whatever they can be as disrespectful and mean and all kinds of things. Shoot them, whatever. With the expectation there won't be any punishment for it. Anyway, I'm digressing here. So there was that, And they want to reopen negotiations for a Palestinian state. And of course, they also, it was the goal was all because, and I don't know if this was a goal beforehand, but afterwards it became the idea that they showed that Israel is not impenetrable. That it's the most militarized stretch of land. I don't know. It's probably the only other more militarized place right now. Well, I don't know, maybe the front in Ukraine, the war front in Ukraine, but Kashmir. But Gaza is definitely up in the top 2 or 3 of the most militarized places. Everything's censored, high-tech stuff. And these guys with, a lot of them were in sandals, but with, guns and, makeshift hand grenades and whatnot, were able to do this operation. And another one of the primary objectives was to, as we know, is to take casualties, or not take casualties, sorry. Hostages. And the reason why is because Israel, there's anywhere between, I've seen estimates between 7,000 to 15,000, who knows how many Palestinians in jails in Israel. Most, they don't have any entitlement to due process. They're not given due process. A lot of them haven't been convicted of charged with anything official or gone through any kind of due process. So the only way that they can put pressure on Israel to release these hostages is through taking hostages of their own.
Right.
And so that is why they wanted to take a lot of hostages. They wanted to take as many hostages as possible, which not dead hostages, living hostages. So it was not in their interest to kill a whole bunch of people if they could. Their interest was to take them as hostages.
Right. That I would say is the military aspect of it. You're actually trying to capture something.
Well, also they did all around Gaza is basically there's lots of military outposts and small bases, but also stitched in with that are settlements.
Yes.
And these settlements, a lot of them are illegal. They're armed. They have a very, let's just say, zealous hatred or disdain for Palestinians. And so you could say, to use a phrase I don't like, that the settlers' family members, especially the women and children, are Israel's human shields. They don't have to dot Gaza. They don't have to interlace Gaza with these what they would call kibbutzes, but are like these armed Israeli settlements. But they do. So of course they want to take the land, but also they are armed. So this is the thing, is that when you talk about just ordinary people going about their lives, well, most people aren't illegal settlers on somebody else's land, particularly on somebody else's land. Yeah, most people aren't participating in an apartheid system, in an occupation that's been going on for generations now. Now, are they the same as a fully outfitted soldier, where it just basically has a sign like "I am a soldier"? No. But are they everyday, ordinary people, just like you and me, just going about our business at our family farm? When all of a sudden these crazy madmen paraglide over and start killing everybody? It's bullshit. Now,
yeah, absolutely.
Go ahead. Go ahead. Do you want to say anything about that first part? I know I kind of went on.
Anybody who converts to Judaism and wants to go to Israel and pledge allegiance to the state of Israel and settle there can do so.
Well,
and they all have legal privileges above a non-Jew who was born there. That's the apartheid reality. Yeah, absolutely. And this is a material political fact.
And it's not like the people who live there don't know this is the situation.
Yeah,
they know very well what the situation is. A lot of it. So, especially the settlers. The settlers know very well what the game is.
Yes.
So to say that there's ordinary people like just mom and pop by the lake for a Saturday, when all of a sudden all hell breaks loose, is bullshit.
Yeah, I mean, and she doesn't give examples of what this glee is that she's speaking of. One of the few people I I've heard say that they had a moment of joy was, for instance, Norman Finkelstein, who's an anti-Zionist Jew and one of the foremost really scholars on this subject, who had sympathy with the Gazans, and he went through all this history and all this political reality that you just went through. But as for the people actually on the ground in the protests, the thing that I saw bandied about, one of the things I saw bandied about the most was an organizer in New York who was belittling the danger that the hostages were in, and because there's claims about certain people being dead, and he was disputing if all of them were actually dead or if they were being tortured and raped, as was being implied. And he's saying something like, they say such and such is being tortured to death and raped, but I'm sure that they're fine. And it turns out in most cases that's true. they're being released, and there's not a bruise on them. So
yeah. Well, to me, it's also that people want to pretend like they don't have any impure thoughts. So humans, so I had when it started to come out what had happened on that day, I had a myriad of emotions, and one of them was, fuck them, show them, not like the individual civilian people, but like Israel, like Netanyahu, right, and the Western imperialism, all that, because I know what it's. I lived there for 2 years. Of course, this was back in the day, 2002, 2004. But I had, I was also my situation was nothing like the typical Palestinian one, because I had a U.S. passport and, could go in and out with, unless the border was closed for military operation, I could leave and enter Gaza pretty much whenever I wanted, except for a couple of times when there was ongoing operations there in response to something that Hamas had done. And typically, because they did start doing suicide bombings in the Second Intifada. And is that a terrorist tactic? Yeah, that's a terrorist tactic. Would I say they're a terrorist organization? No, because they are a resistance organization, armed resistance organization. They have clear goals. They are opposed to Israeli occupation. And they are a nationalist thing because they want a Palestinian state. So they're opposed to occupation. They want a Palestinian state. And of course, they're also, they're not a Marxist and Leninist group. They're an Islamic group. But
they're a coalition currently with a Marxist Leninist group.
Yeah.
The Popular Front for the Liberation of Palestine.
So that's what I would say
just to be clear, currently.
Yeah. And there's certain people that can't make that distinction because, again, I would say, well, Israel's basically a terrorist state. If you look at their Palestinian policy, very much a terrorist state. Does that mean that I mean, I could say that the IDF's a terrorist organization, which would make more sense than the other way. But it's probably the best way to say is that Israeli Defense Force engages in a lot of terrorist activities.
Right,
they do a lot of things that are for the only reason is to terrorize, to control that population that they have control over and can get away with anything they want,
including stealing their organs. By the way,
Hamas is saying, and Hamas from the beginning has said, not with your. There's going to be, we are going to make there be consequences to the extent that we can. There will be consequences for the violence that you put upon us. So they were never a nonviolent movement. And they were also quite critical of Fatah and the PLO, and they were so quick to say they would never, to disarm or take that off the table.
Right.
Because they felt like, they're just going to bit by bit gobble us up. Anyway, so, so again, and if those of you who are interested, I'll put a link in the thing. Scott Ritter called the raid, Hamas's raid on October 7th, the most successful military raid of the century in terms of the planning, in terms of the execution. of it. And that doesn't mean there weren't civilian casualties, or we could call collateral damage. So this is another thing about measuring with two cups. So when so Hamas is a terrorist, but Israel is an army, or it has a defense force or commandos. There's that there's that old George Carlin joke that Israeli terrorists are commandos and Palestinian commandos are terrorists. I think from maybe 96 or something.
86, I think.
But anyway, and so Hamas. So when Israel attacks or invades or does whatever it does to Palestinians, then there's collateral damage, or there's civilian casualties. But with Hamas, it's a mass slaughter. So it's just this idea that they can't think of them as a group that has developed that does have a political platform, does have a political ideology. They don't have to like it, the Islamic the ideology of it, but they have political objectives that are rational. And if you look at their political objectives and you look at what they did on October 7th, what they did on October 7th is rational as per those objectives.
Indeed.
So, and that's just being very risk board of it. I'm not saying, and I'm sure they realize that Israel would react the way it's reacting. Maybe they're a bit surprised at how crazy it is, but they knew that Israel would go on a bombing rampage. And so I'm sure they also are knowing that Hamas made a decision that even if it takes 10,000, 20,000, 30,000, 40,000 dead Palestinians, half of which are children, it's worth the price, because it's now or it's never. Either this impasse breaks now, and after this carnage, there's a path to a Palestinian state, or at the very, or at least the short term, the hostages released. Stop disgracing our third holy, the Temple Mount. End of the blockade. My guess would be one of the main things. So the idea that it was just violence for violence's sake, that they don't have a political ideology, they're not just a group that gets off on killing Jewish people. That is bullshit. And I'm not saying that people don't, who knows? There's also a lot of American soldiers or UK soldiers or Indian soldiers who get off on being a soldier, the active part of it. Yeah.
Yes.
So there's that. And also, I don't know, I can't speak for what every every Hamas fighter did when they were in Israel, but it's quite clear to me, and again, this took a bit of time, again, because of all the barrage of bullshit, to be able to piece together more what happened on that day. And we also, so she's, and this is, since she publishes this week, this isn't like on BBC or MSNBC or the New York Times, but she is in a left space. So the idea that she, like Norman Finkelstein, that doesn't make a dent in this, or Aaron Mate and Max Blumenthal, or some of the other people who have been critical of Israelis bullshit for a long time, who are Jewish. Not that it helps to say that, and very anti-Zionist. So the idea that so to me, this is a strategic ignorance. So,
weapons of mass destruction lies.
And he tries
to deconstructed that propaganda in real time in 2002, 2003. So he has a wonderful track record of analysis. He had a similar deconstruction in real time of the propaganda around the Ukraine war. Mm-hmm. And he's a former Marine and military intelligence officer.
And he takes the slings and arrows. Yeah, he's a Russian sympathizer, or now he's an anti-Semite, all the stuff, So if you're critical of the Ukraine, then you're like a Russian asset or a Putin patsy. And if you're critical of Israel, you're, an anti-Semite terrorist sympathizer. It's like, well, all right. Or a nihilist.
Right.
A nihilist who celebrates the death of the massacre of ordinary people. Okay. Here we go. You might as well ask, why would we still care about? Okay, here comes the good part. if I remember correctly, you might well ask why we should still be talking about October 7th, given that Israel's bombardment and invasion of Gaza, listen to this, wait for this, has now claimed thousands of Palestinian lives. Claimed. Not murdered, not even killed. Claimed thousands of Palestinian lives. Okay. So, but my thing is, okay. So let's. I'll get through this. I'll try to be quick. Okay, I'll read this whole thing, and if there's something that you have to say you're going to explode, then please, I'll stop and you do it, and I'll wait for my explosion. Sorry, I shouldn't say explosion. Anyway, okay. Claimed. So Israel's bombardment and invasion of Gaza has now claimed many thousands of Palestinian lives. The answer is that both Hamas and those who celebrated the initial attack knew, on some level, what the future held. That outburst of destruction and killing would prompt a brutal retaliation, and welcomed that too. Even if Hamas had some broader strategy, the short-sightedness of those who cheered them on is a symptom of fetishization of resistance for its own sake. To be sure, many of those who have taken to the streets more recently for a ceasefire are doing so not because they approve of Hamas's action, but because they hew to the modern. Oh, here we go. Because they hew to the modern value placed on life. But the glee felt at the initial slaughter revealed a severe weakening.
Yeah.
You or me, Garrett, first. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you. I don't know. You know, it just seems like such bad faith. It seems like such sleight of hand. It seems also such, again, straw man games and putting words in other people's mouths without quoting them, without citing any
or asking
examples, really just counting on the received wisdom and the received propaganda narrative that's been put out by the Zionist media. And when I say the Zionist media, I don't mean the Jewish media. I mean in the same sense that Joe Biden publicly proclaimed last year, I am a Zionist. It's Zionist media. It's Israel first, right? And they follow that propaganda line, and they don't question it. Yeah, again, as I said, people have a diversity of reasons for protesting Israel, I suppose, but I think you already covered most of them, and she is studiously ignoring them.
Yeah. Well, and also this idea that there was a lot, because this issue, again, she says October 7th, and she knows this. It's been going on for many, many years, and people know this. A lot of people know this. So when the people started to go to the street with Palestinian flags, they weren't going out. I mean, I didn't see very many Hamas flags. I'm not saying they weren't there. There was Palestinian flags. Yes. And this is the idea that the Israel, which is a Zionist colony in Palestine that's backed up by the full force of Western imperialism, and breaks international law, humanitarian law, the human rights of Palestinians with reckless and giddy, dare I say, abandon, Ashley. And so the idea that so that's one thing to keep in mind. The people who are aware of this, so there's a reason why they would come out and show their support for Palestinian liberation, for the end of occupation, or the end of the blockade, the end of the occupation, and for go to a one-state solution. It does not. She wants to say that everybody out there, in the first, I guess, couple of weeks after this happened, was there to celebrate the attack, the slaughter, the massacre that happened on October 7th, when it was
her game. Notice her game.
Yeah, and
she brings up the carnival against capitalism apropos of nothing. And she's suggesting she's using that to support her view that all these protests were a celebration. How were they a celebration? Were there fireworks? Was there champagne?
Yeah.
What,
Were people, I mean, it was like
a celebration.
Well, and the thing is, it's like, what about the celebration when Osama bin Laden was taken out and his body dumped overseas? I'm sure he wasn't the only person killed in that raid. What about the celebration? People were excited when the atomic bombs were dropped on Nagasaki and Hiroshima. There's countless video of Israelis celebrating the bombing and killing of Palestinians.
Right.
Pogroms on the regular in the West Bank, because the settlers know that they get the wink, they get the green light, they can do whatever they want to the Palestinians. Again, the Palestinians have no civil rights in Israel. They don't have any civil rights, and that Israel recognizes, or that any at all, and their natural rights are disregarded at every stand. So it's not like they just don't happen to like Israelis for no particular reason. And she's also assuming that people, so it's this idea again. I would really, because if I had been, so this idea that you can't support, this is the thing, she's conflating it. You can't support Palestine. Anybody that was supporting Palestine and Palestinians for their liberation, dare I say it, from the river to the sea, or from the Jordan to the coast, or whatever we have to say now, which is basically saying that that Israel's a Zionist colony that was set up by the Western powers, so to speak, that's backed by the full force of Western imperialism, that's belligerent to its neighbors, and brutalizes and kills and expels Palestinians with impunity, and has for generations.
Right.
But they're the ones who respect human life. Hamas terrorists, they're these crazy people who just want to kill for the spectacle of it, just to take some people out. And some of the people there who've lost family members, who may have been orphaned. You can't find really anybody in Gaza or the West Bank who hasn't lost somebody to Israel, or has somebody imprisoned. So did they have ill will towards to Israel? Of course they did, and so would she. It's the idea that they're not supposed to. So they're just supposed to, be very, very good, be very, really good occupied people, and not cause any quote unquote ordinary people in Israel any problems, or anybody else for that matter, and not have any bad feelings towards Israelis either. That's also not good. I'm like, what? But we can, our own cultures can have access of evil and can say anything they want about, Palestinians or Arabs or Chinese or Russians or whatever that is. That's fine, because somehow we're so, I don't know. The chauvinism here is really interesting. Just because in terms of again, but this is what happens. This is a perfect example of what happens, even on the left. And is that once Hamas was labeled a terrorist by, I think it might have been Netanyahu, or it was Sharon, or then Netanyahu, and that was picking up in the United States, like, yeah, we also consider them a terrorist, and then the EU does. It totally depoliticized the situation and Palestinian resistance, and really just paved the way for just such double standards and dehumanization. So she says notice that she says Israel's bombardment and invasion of Gaza has now claimed many thousands of lives. That's true. And it's a war crime. What they're doing is a war crime. It doesn't,
Absolutely.
even if you could say, okay, yeah, they're a terrorist group, fine. And even if they went on a murderous rampage and that was just to kill people, which is not the case, it would still, what Israel's doing is still a war crime. And what they were doing before that was. So people say October 7th, not about October 6th, October 5th, 1 year ago, 2 years ago, 5 years ago, 10 years ago, 20 years ago, 30 years ago. And for these fucking people to get on their high horse and not just condemn them, like what the fuck would they do? But everybody else who went out on the to protest the Palestinian flag as being a nihilist, fuck her. I mean, really, it's just absurd. And she's too good, and she's smarter. She knows better. So I don't know what this is about. Maybe she's
it's absurd if you try to it's absurd if you try to judge it logically, but that may not be what she intends. She may intend this to be very illogical, emotive propaganda, verbose as it may be.
This could have been coming out from Netanyahu's spokesperson, yo.
Well, a more blunt and crude version, yes. But at the end of the day, look what's been done. Hamas have been referred to as terrorists, and the protesters in the street are celebrating them. And they're sympathizers with terrorists. They're terrorist sympathizers. You can condense all of this down to that 5-6 word sentence. The protesters are Hamas terrorist sympathizers.
Well, and I love this. So of course, and again, when this started to happen, when this went down, there was a variety of things. My first was like, what happened actually? Because you hadn't heard anything since the March of Return, but that wasn't really that wasn't Hamas-led movement, because that was it's totally nonviolent, and they were just basically where people the March of Return, where people would just march unarmed, hands up, towards the wall, one of the parts of the wall that separates Gaza from Ashkelon. And the idea was just to leave. They wanted to leave, and they were shot down one by one by snipers, including people in wheelchairs, press people. Apparently that was not. And why was that? Was that just so the whole Israeli side's totally absent from this essay of hers. Doesn't matter, apparently.
Right.
Context doesn't matter. The fact that she's just parroting Israeli propaganda. No, it didn't even occur to her to treat Hamas like she would any other political actor.
Yeah.
That is involved in the resistance, long-term resistance against a so much more powerful actor who's the occupier. In this situation, no appreciation for that, because I guess this is the only armed resistance movement or resistance movement that's ever been violent. That civilians have got caught in the middle, and Israel itself doesn't shoot civilians all the time, even their own. So that's also
again, she's counting on people who are ignorant of history. The Viet Cong did kill civilians. They were a guerrilla army. They went after soft targets. The Tet Offensive was
the only targets they could reach. They couldn't get hard targets.
Yeah,
because
exactly.
It was so asymmetrical. So it's either just say, well, fuck it, we can't fight the U.S. military on its own terms, so I guess we'll just surrender. And it's the same. I'm glad you brought that up. It's the same thing with Israel. It's like Israel sets these terms of engagement. Whether it be the hostages, and also with the indiscriminate violence that they've imposed on Palestinians forever. But Hamas reacts in terms of their terms of engagement, and they're the terrorists. They're the ones that don't care about life. They're just this mass slaughter, this carnivalesque of gore, or whatever shit she wants to say. It's sick. I mean, it's just like the idea that she for some reason can't imagine, or that there could be more to the story here. And she has a PhD, and she just left her. She's not a stupid person,
right?
But for some reason, this must have really freaked her out. Well, of course, if she truly believed everything that she was being told, everything that came out, all the Hasbro, all the Israeli propaganda that came out on October 7th, then okay, this would make sense. But even then, if she's that stupid, then I shouldn't even be bothering with anything she ever says.
Yeah.
And it doesn't mean she could have been quite critical of, that them knowing that, okay, the what they did on October 7th was going to be likely be a high casualty event. Did Hamas know that? Probably. They know they've been fighting Israel a long time. They're aware of, they know much more about them than anybody else does in terms of fighting them. Did they know that Israel would react like they did? Yeah. Maybe not. Maybe even they're surprised by how everyone's okay with all the babies piling up. I don't know. Did they know that? Yeah. Did they think that would help with public opinion? Yeah. But this is all political. It's not just because they want to cause some problems and have a fun time. No one's having that much fun in Gaza with this. Okay?
Yeah.
So
well,
it's this thing that, what can they do if they were to meet? Now, Israel, of course, also doesn't follow the rules of war and international humanitarian law. They've never followed that with regards to Palestinians. But we'll just put that to the side for Ms. Fowley, Dr. Fowley here.
Right.
But
well, I just put a link in the chat to the.
They would have to say, well, fuck it, we're done.
Right.
If they don't go after soft targets,
right.
Or even on October 7th, they did go after hard targets. They went after, there was the outpost, there was the main military establishment in Erez. They had for like a day and a half, I think, before the Israelis could take over control of it again. So, there were certain objectives they had, strategic and military objectives that they had. And again, I'll just go to Scott Ritter here because he has, he's the military analyst, and then there's not me, but that's what it was. Now, is it unfortunate that people are getting killed? Yeah. But this situation's been going on for a long time. And the reason why it keeps on going is mainly because of the United States. And to blame Hamas is just like, what? You don't have to love them. You don't have to like it. You don't have to be like, oh yeah, I'm so glad they whatever. But it's like, let's grow up, people. I mean, what do they think?
Yeah.
It's like any military ever has not done this, hasn't done worse. Mm-hmm. Which doesn't mean we should be like not care, but let's not be hypocrites. Let's use the same morals and rules for both groups, realizing the contextual difference, the fact that if they were to only focus on hard targets, military targets, they can't, because they're not allowed anything that would allow them to engage with Israel in that manner. And she has to know that.
On equal terms, no.
Yeah. No, they don't have the entire backing of the Western imperialism. They don't have an air force, a navy, aircraft carriers, the missiles, the helicopters, the tanks. No, they have some guns and their homemade rockets that if they hit someone directly can kill them. Yeah. But they do a little bit of property damage. If they hit somebody directly, they can make it, then, but most of those are taken out of, by the Iron Dome, and like Molotov cocktail type hand grenades. That's what they have.
Yeah. Well, I just put a link in the chat to the massacre at Hui, the Wikipedia article on it, which you should take it with a grain of salt and look at the sources, like with any Wikipedia article. Yeah. But it is a very well-known fact that the Viet Cong in 1968, in what is looked back as their very successful Tet Offensive, turning point in the war, did commit summary executions of people who were disarmed, some of whom were just flat out civilians, in the hundreds, possibly in the thousands, depending which source you go to. And they knew very well that the U.S. would retaliate with massive bombardment of North Vietnam and of Viet Cong centers and kill lots of Vietnamese civilians. They knew that very well. That resistance would have a price.
Yeah.
So this is nothing new. This is very 20th century. If you look at any of those decolonization struggles.
Well, the IRA, of course, was also they were a terrorist group for a long time. Yeah, and Sinn Féin now is part.
By these standards, absolutely.
Yeah,
but it's a double standard if you're a quote unquote non-state actor.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay. Let's see. So yeah, and let's see how she's gonna. There's one more page here. Oh yeah, we're at the end now. So in between this, there was a paragraph or two about Canadian assisted suicide, where it used to be, if I remember correctly, that if you had a terminal disease, you could have euthanasia, but now they're relaxing that, so it's people who can have assisted suicide if they're not terminal.
Right.
And so this is an interesting two cases. So this is kind of also interesting, just lucky, because you have to think this is one of her theses. This thesis of hers about progressive nihilism and just disruption for disruption's sake. This didn't evolve out of her thinking really critically about Hamas and Israel Palestine. This is something she already had been working on. So she takes this thing about saying that people who were out in the street after October 7th were, just celebrating. She's accusing them of celebrating a massacre, and then pairing that with Canada's suicide policy to make a case that we're in a progressive nihilist period on the left. I don't know anybody on the left who thinks. I mean, I only know what I only, I haven't heard of people on this being a major banner issue on leftist groups, the right to suicide. Maybe it is. I mean, euthanasia in terms of terminal illness, yeah, but people who are depressed deciding to go, or just
this is something real that they're pushing in Canada, and many populists on the right are concerned about it, and there are populists on the left who are increasingly concerned about it. I'm a big part of her target audience for this.
Okay.
And I don't see any parallel between this. I mean, this is something that's being pushed by the state and by the establishment. I guess you could say the establishment left, but the establishment left did not push these pro-Palestinian protests.
No.
The DSA, as I mentioned last time, was supporting some pro-Palestinian groups up until this summer when they purged them. The national office purged the pro-Palestinian groups, the Students for Justice in Palestine, and so on. It still lives on to some extent in the local chapters, certainly the local New York chapter. But the establishment left is against these protests, and they're only accepting them grudgingly. Obviously, we saw everybody, no one but Rashida Tlaib, the actual literal Palestinian in Congress, among the Democrats, the only one who dared to make a pro-Palestinian, pro-international law case against this bombardment, analysis of the situation. So one of these is being pushed by the technocratic, progressive establishment. The other is being pushed by grassroots, anti-colonial, radical movement. So there's no comparison between the two, other than that there are left populists concerned about both, and she's trying to play a little game here.
So it's kind of would you say that it could be a forced comparison, Garrett?
Yes, it's very much a forced comparison.
It's doing more work than should be asked of it. Okay. Of course, I'm a bit biased now at this point. Let's see. Who knows? She may win me over. Although I do want to say something about this when she's saying, basically blaming almost Hamas and the people who took to the streets after October 7th for the Palestinian lives that have been claimed by Israel. So Israel isn't responsible for its own actions. What about here? Oh my God! Here's the thing. What about what's to be expected from Israel's actions? What Hamas did, or that there is such a group as Hamas, comes straight from is an obvious outcome, an expected outcome of their of the occupation and the apartheid and the ethnic cleansing.
Yes, and the humiliation of the PLO at Oslo.
Do you see what I'm saying on that?
Yeah.
How it's like, oh well, they should, now that all these thousands of lives have been claimed, so Israel doesn't kill people or murder people. They claim their bombs.
Here's another irony.
Israel bombs are so magical. They claim lives. They don't kill or explode people and children and women and other unarmed civilians. They just claim the lives. and
well,
and
they
it's
did.
not
They
their fault.
they
It's not
didn't. They
their
didn't
fault.
claim the lives. They did not claim the lives. Their bombs claimed.
Yes,
the lives.
right. Yes, they're just the go-between. They're just the vanishing mediator.
Right. But here's the real irony here. Here's the real irony. This woman, I've forgotten her name already. Ashley. Yeah. She's basically telling the Gazans to just kill themselves.
Yeah.
Her and the Canadian technocrats would have a similar solution for the Palestinians. Just
quietly.
Kill yourselves.
Yeah.
Life is bad. We know. Unfortunately, there's no solution. Everything must come to an end. Just check out.
Well, not now.
Don't fight back. Just check out.
Why prolong it? Yeah.
Yeah.
Don't fight back.
You have a terminal situation. Accept it.
Yeah. So she's in denial over her nihilism.
Yeah.
Because first
She's
of all, the
nihilism.
Hamas, for example, they weren't, of course, the first 40 years of this of the Israeli occupation, there was no Hamas. But if you're going to occupy a people, so if you're going to brutalize, kill, expel them, all the stuff that goes on with impunity, and people try, failed peace accords, all the stuff that goes on. So of course you're going to get. It would be more surprising if there wasn't a group like Hamas, if there wasn't an armed wing of the Palestinian resistance. That would be the surprise, and it's I would say natural outcome of Israelis' policies, backed up by the United States since 1947, and since backed by the United States also people, because there was guilt over World War II, and of course the Zionist project has been. It's not only conflating Judaism with Zionism, but also using what happened utilizing what happened in World War II to be a buffer from criticism. Yeah. And you have to give them their due. They've been quite successful. I mean, they've, I mean, they have, they have almost every US politician and most UK and EU politicians, and Modi's probably a fan, and who knows what. So they've been, and they've been going strong now for 48 years. They keep on increasing their territory illegally, but whatever. And so, yeah. But so Hamas is what you're going to get, but she's not going to tell Israel that. Yeah. And then she says, but okay, so they had to know these bad things would happen. Okay, fine. These things have happened. But if they had done nothing, then what? No one wants to answer that. They want to point the finger. This is terrible because of what happened on October 7th. And yeah, one of the thoughts that I had was, I knew, and simply I thought, because I have people I know care about in Gaza, and also some in Israel actually as well, a few. Who were also anyway, mostly in Gaza. And my first thing was like, oh my God, this is going to be the response is going to be extreme. Yeah.
Yeah.
And once I found out what actually had happened, because I was like, what's going on? And what actually did they do? And then I was like, well, how is this even possible? Because at first I thought maybe one or two guys got out or something, And I was like, but I'm like, more and more trickling in. I'm like, what? And then when I saw it got reports that that they really got caught with their pants down, and that Hamas had controlled the jail in Ashkelon for I think like a day and a half, and some of the other small military outposts also for a while. And I was like, good for you guys, because they had a successful mission. Now, if it had been a suicide bombing, I would not have felt that way.
Right.
And of course, I knew the civilians, the people who weren't, the people got that we'll just say civilians. Are unarmed people going to get caught in the middle? Yeah. Is that upsetting?
Yeah.
Yeah. You know what? Occupation apartheid is a risky, dirty business, and the response to it is as well.
Yes.
It's hard for me to
Based on real-time mass migration, particularly.
Sorry, go ahead.
Particularly with based on real-time mass migration, you know, of people from Brooklyn and you know, and so on. This is very much avoidable if the U.S. and the various Zionist charities were not actively trying to recruit these people.
Yeah, this was
to go there.
People keep on saying, "Oh, 1967 borders, whatever." If there was ever the political will in the United States to push Israel to do it, they would have done it. But they never did because they don't give a shit.
Right.
You know, it's like the Zionists. Again, so the people in Israel, the people who Zionism is a movement, and I'm not an expert on Zionism, but I'll say what I come to my current understanding of it. Is a project that started in earnest in the late 1800s, and basically it was the idea to switch to make being a Jew into a nationality, and about wanting to go and reclaim the homeland or develop a homeland, rather than being about religion and and that type of thing. So it's the idea that the Zionist project was obviously it's a nationalist project. They want their own nation state, and they had to convince other Jewish people to also want that as well, or want that in addition to it. And there's a rabbi. There's I can't remember his name, but I'll put the link up. He was on Unregistered. He's been on a couple of podcasts, and he's a rabbi. He's in Brooklyn. I can't remember his name. But I
think his name might be Shapiro, actually.
Yeah, Shapiro. Yeah. So he said two things that were really interesting, but I never thought about it before. And he basically said that Zionism for him and other, not just him, but there's quite a few Jewish people who think this way. So again, we have to remember that Jewish people are as divided and heterogeneous as other groups. But I remember he said, why should I care about Israel? Israel's like Mongolia to me. Israel's like China to me. Israel isn't anything, leave me out of it. And he said that Zionism for him is a falsification, is a perversion of Judaism. That they took religious concepts and turned them into political concepts about getting about getting a land, and about being, what makes Jewish people is about this homeland, this historical, biblical historical homeland.
Right,
is what it's.
Right.
They've been wandering around, or they've been in this diaspora for 2,000 years or whatever, or I guess now it's 2,000 years, but again, almost 2,000 years at that point. And the goal is, and then they made the goal not a new goal, but always has been in a way, getting back this homeland. And he said, well, this would be like, he goes, this would be like telling Christians that Christianity isn't a religion. It isn't about Jesus or the Word of God or the Bible or anything like that. It was just basically about getting a nation state. It's just like a place saver until we're able to have self-determination in whether it be Italy or Rome or the United States. And so now that that's done, all that religious stuff can go away, because it was always already a national project.
Yes.
And so that was an interesting takeaway.
Or like the Crusades.
That makes sense. And he also said that. So for him, he also is he's also I don't know how much of an outlier he is, but it seemed from one interview I saw with him, it drives him crazy when people say, "Oh, I'm 25% Jewish," or I'm half Jewish. It's like, well, what does that mean exactly? Because for him, what made the Jews into the people was receiving the Torah on Mount Sinai from Moses all those years ago. And so you're Jewish if you try to live your life in accordance to those principles, serving God by following the Torah the best you can. That's what makes you a Jew.
Right.
Now, is that the most, and so obviously if you have people who are more secular, who want to get away from the religious part, who may even be kind of embarrassed by the more orthodox Jewish practices and people, and you kind of you get to, so it was just, so not to ramble on much, but just to bring that up, the idea that most people um, have no idea what Zionism really is or its history, and most people don't have an idea the different ways that people, the different issues that people have with it, because people could be against Zionism because they don't like the occupation, they like the apartheid, but they're a believer that Israel should be the Jewish state, and there's people like him who are like, no, that's sacrilege,
Right.
you know,
Right.
that's a very politicized nationalistic interpretation of a lot of history and a lot of their holy texts that don't
Absolutely.
add up otherwise, unless it's to serve this purpose of rationalizing the establishment of Israel where Israel is.
Rationalizing is the word.
Yeah.
Because again, there's no logic. The goalposts move constantly. Is it a religious definition? Is it a racial definition?
Yeah, is it religion? Is it ethnicity? Is it a language? And he went through these and said, that we're a bit off track here, but just said that the only thing that really that's consistent, that makes sense, is that it's a religion.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
That makes logical consistency. But of course, a lot of things in human society and politics are far from rational. But I hadn't heard that that analogy before, but it was really, really helpful. And I'm sure that there are other people who have other ideas. But I think that what really hit home to me, and I knew that some of the Zionists or quite a few actually, were secular. And he also mentioned that in terms of who's a Jew and who isn't, he said that there was a guy who was like, his mom and dad were Jewish, but he, for whatever reason, I can't remember, he converted to Christianity.
Mm-hmm.
It was like a serious Christian. And he, in his later years, wanted to move to Israel, and they wouldn't allow it. They wouldn't allow him in. They wouldn't give him citizenship because he was Christian.
Right. Right.
So it's like, well, and so he was saying, and so Rabbi Shapiro's point on this particular example was like, okay, so you can be an atheist and a Jew, and you're more than welcome to become an Israeli citizen. But if you're a Jew and a Christian, you're not welcome.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it was, I thought that was kind of, so again, just the kind of the inconsistency is like, again, and most people, you hear that all the time, they're non-practicing, or they're, they say I'm ethnically a Jew. And so, and of course, some of this is just, that as groups, groups change, and there can be splinterings, and there's with the secularism and whatnot. But I hadn't heard that before from somebody so forcefully, that to be a Jew is to follow the Torah. That's what makes one a Jew.
Right. Right.
Which makes sense religiously, but I don't know. Anyway, so I was, so I'm sure he has lots of fans. Rabbi Shapiro, can imagine. Although he seems like he can hold on. And he has a very thick Brooklyn accent. So
yes, I watched him on Kim Iverson's show. He was very compelling.
Okay. Yeah, I saw him. Yeah, go ahead.
But yeah, I think there's a dimension of crusading here. I think maybe the reason that Christian guy got turned down is because it's a crusade that doesn't want to admit that it's a crusade. But it is basically the same premise. It's like religion as a pretext to claim land, other people's land in a different continent. Yeah. I don't agree with the, Osama bin Laden's letter about 9/11, and that's the key to this whole riddle. But one thing that may have been accurate is when he kept referring to the Crusaders. The Crusaders coming from the West. I think there's definitely an element of that about this.
Yeah. Well, no, for sure. And I mean that what helps ground me, especially when if you're in the trenches too long online, or what out and about, is that to remember, like, to me, Elon Pape's, there was 2 quotes from him. I think it was in 10 Myths of Israel, but it might have been one of his earlier books. And it just basically says that, that the goal of Zionism is as much of Palestine as possible with as few Palestinians as possible, and that the core of it is, and that you cannot achieve the Zionist goal of the state of Israel without the annihilation of the native Palestinian. And if you keep that in mind and foreground on the land, this is about the land. This is about consolidating a Zionist colony, nation state on the land that was occupied by other groups of people, primarily Palestinian Arabs, mostly Muslim, but also Christian, and also a few Jewish people as well. Then it becomes clear. Then you're able to navigate a lot more of this bullshit. People want to make it about people want to make it about everything else except for that.
So
it's about our nihilism now, or it's about anti-modern, or who knows what. But but not about what the crux of the core of the issue is. People really want to avoid those questions or those points a lot. Why, besides just that it's not politically convenient or culturally convenient to do so? I don't know. So let's see how she wraps up again. Sorry. Hamas and many on the Western left agree on one thing: the world should not continue to exist. Whereas religious zealots eschew life for something beyond this world, secular Westerners increasingly eschew life as retribution for human complicity in injustice and environmental degradation. Witness the rise of voluntary human extinction movement, but Hamas and progressive nihilists share a willingness to sacrifice the real world and people in it in the process. Hamas's carnival of violence allowed progressives to live out a fantasy of self-immolation from the comfort of their homes. And the last line,
I feel very much like I'm the target audience.
Okay, good. So tell me, what do you?
I mean, the subtitle of my blog, of my Substack, is "Reclaiming the Humanist Left." So she's decrying the anti-humanist turn, in the Western left, that a lot of people like me decry. And again, trying to conflate it with Hamas, who have nothing to do with the Western left. Belatedly, there's some people on the Western left who are reacting to it, but they're not the originators of this. They hadn't been paying a great deal of attention to Palestine. All of this is a massive stretch, and it's a stretch towards a certain agenda, which, as I said, just comes down to the protesters are celebrating Hamas terrorists and innocent Jews dying, which is just another Netanyahu talking point.
But without accusing people of anti-Semitism, they're just anti-life, apparently.
Right. Which is 9/11 rhetoric. It's 9/11 rhetoric that Al Qaeda are just a death cult. I just put my Substack in the chat there if people want to see it. And I think a lot of this is as I was saying to you, an update on the Christopher Hitchens game, where the Christopher Hitchens game, starting in the late 90s, where he went from the Trotskyist to neocon pipeline in real time. There's a tangled genealogy from American Trotskyists to neoconservatives that goes through Irving Kristol and the New York intellectuals. Christopher Hitchens did it in real time. Where he was with the Socialist Workers Party in his youth.
Sorry, I want to hear about this, but if you could just tell me quick, and for the people who are watching this now, or maybe watching it later, what makes a Trotskyist a Trotskyist? What are the indications that someone's a Trotskyist?
Well, a Trotskyist is someone who rejects the Soviet Union and he rejects most manifestations of actual existing socialism, right?
Okay.
And Stalin was, nearly as bad as Hitler, and simply a betrayal of the revolution.
Okay.
And there is some diversity in its arguments, but it basically does come down to saying that the Western democracies are always the lesser evil, right? And also that it has to be a explicitly Marxist a movement in order to be supported, which was something that Coutron was saying in the original interview that we looked at last time, where he said, that Hamas were petty bourgeois because they didn't have the proper class analysis, and so on and so forth. And he tried to quote Lenin to support this, but when you actually look at what Lenin wrote at the time, Lenin said, "We support all of the colonized nations against the imperialist ones, regardless of the class basis. Like in the global class basis, like imperialism is the highest stage of capitalism." Like that was literally a name of one of Lenin's full-length books, and that's the primary contradiction in capitalism that needs to be broken, and there needs to be colonization, and that's part of the class struggle. That's something that Trotsky is, as I said, hedge on, and it's very shady. It's very shady. And something that's something that has led.
Shitty or shady? I guess there's not much of a difference.
Both.
It's okay. What's shady about it, in your opinion?
It's shady because they claim to be upholding the legacy of Lenin. That they say that they're just against Stalin, but when you dig into it, they're actually against Lenin as well. And it was Coutron brought Lenin into the conversation as if he bolstered his point, right? Even if you're not like an admirer of Lenin necessarily, it's super shady that he would bring up Lenin and then misrepresent him.
Name dropping.
Yeah. When Lenin basically says the opposite.
Yeah, and just before we pivot to Coutron, and his take on this, I mean, the world. She says here, the world should not continue to exist. So that's what Hamas is about. Really? They don't want occupation to continue to exist. They don't want the blockade, the draconian blockade against Gaza to continue to exist. They don't want this to, so yeah. Now, once it's all over, if it ever does end, will they have a hard time adjusting to quote unquote civilian life? Maybe. That's a different story. But the idea that they don't want the world to continue, like the world in general.
This bullshit. Sounds much more like a description of Christian Zionists, actually. They're the ones who want the world to end.
And also, if if you look at what's going on now, I mean, you have, again, the idea that Israel is just a faint echo in this. This is all about Hamas. Well, no, this is about, this is not about any of that. That's not about it either. There are tools she's using to make her argument about how a lot of the left has veered what she's calling progressive nihilism. And she's just using certain people's, what she's saying, support of Hamas, which she says are terrorists. So then if Hamas is a terrorist, anybody that went out to support it's just a lot of conflation. Yeah. Just using this as, so everybody, all those people who are out on the street and protesting and or showing in solidarity with Palestinians, we're somehow glorifying and reveling and celebrating what happened October 7th. Okay. That's her. That's when we just have to take her word for it. I don't know what media she was watching, but who knows? Maybe they found a couple of people and were showing it on a loop. I don't know. So there's that. So whereas religious zealots eschew life for something beyond this world, this is again, they're not this idea that it's almost like she thinks they all thought they were going to die and get 72 virgins or shit. They had again the objective. Now, there was a logical objective to what they did on October 7th. You can disagree with it. You can say the cost was too high. You can say that they knew that, of course, if you're a resistance force with no, without a state, with no Army, Navy, Air Force, Marines, all this stuff, and you have, your brigades, your militia, your armed militias or whatever, then yeah, the targets you're going to be able to do are going to be soft, although some of them were quite a few of them were military targets that day as well. But you can make that argument, but to say that it was just about killing is bullshit.
Yeah.
And again, this so undermines the notion of resistance, Palestinian resistance. I mean, Jesus Christ, what are these poor people never get a fucking break with the left. I mean, I find this obscene. I find this, and of course, I know more about the situation than the average, about this situation in Gaza and the history of the conflict than the average person. But this is obscene to me.
It is obscene.
She's
it is obscene,
and it's been going on for this 75-year tragedy, this 75-year failure of the United States. Yeah. And in particular, because we're Americans, so we can show that as well, because they wouldn't be able to do there wouldn't be an Israel without the United States backing them and supporting them and turning a blind eye and letting them do. So like I made mention in a tweet that, there's a lot of stuff people say it's complicated, whatever. And sure, you can complicate something, but it's like the Zionists got their colony and they get to brutalize and kill and expel Palestinians. And the U.S. ignores that. And the U.S. and then the Western imperialism at large gets a quote unquote unsinkable aircraft carrier in the strategically relevant Middle East. You know, that's what this is. Geopolitically, that's what this is. Now, people can have, all kinds of things. It doesn't mean that there aren't people in Israel who, who are born and raised there. And of course they, I'm not saying, that there's other things that go on there. You can personalize it, make it all about, a human interest story, and that's fine. But it's like, that's what this is about geopolitically. And when that changes, if that ever changes, then Israel's in serious trouble.
Yeah.
If the status quo continues, if there's not a turn away from the far right that basically pretty much at this point would be happy with killing every single Palestinian in Gaza and the West Bank, it seems, and think that it's glory, enshrouded in glory, that Barry Weiss would call it an unfortunate burden or an unavoidable burden.
Yeah.
The death of Palestinian civilians is an unavoidable burden for attaining the vision of Zionism. That's a quote from her. But it's Hamas and the supporters of Palestinian liberation that are, that aren't willing to pluck them out and throw them under the bus as terrorists, and that are the real problem here. We should that seems to be the thing. But again, but Hamas and progressive nihilists share a willingness to sacrifice real world people in the process. You know who's sacrificed more than anybody else for the everyday happy lives of people in Israel? Palestinians.
Obviously.
I mean, and this is what it's like. What are you talking about? I guess it's just their lot in life. So it's okay to have a willingness to sacrifice, not even a willingness, but
there are some people who would simply call this genocide denial, right?
Who get off. That's part of the binds them together. The sacrifice of the Palestinians. Sorry, the Palestinians in Gaza and the West Bank. They've been sacrificed for the project of creating a Jewish state. Guess that's not a problem for her.
Without a doubt, to the tune of 5,000 children in just the past month alone. But Yeah, this is obscene. It is outrageous, and there are Israeli Holocaust scholars who say that this is a genocide. So a lot of people would quite simply say that this is genocide denial.
Yeah, it is.
I mean, and she's so flagrant about it, and she's so self-righteous about it. You're the death cult, right?
Yeah,
Not us, not us who are complacent about the murder of 5,000 children, and blame that all on Hamas, not on the Israelis who are dropping the bomb. Yeah. I'm being conservative.
Over 7,000 now.
But yeah.
That they know of.
It may be more, and it may be 20,000 dead and still instead of around 10,000. We don't even know. And the health system is destroyed, so they're not counting the bodies anymore. So it's a nightmare.
And we can imagine her shaking her finger as well. You should have known that. Hamas should have known. So this is, I guess, since they should have known, it's their fault that Israel is, starving and carpet bombing and a consigned population. Okay. I mean, yeah. It's really okay. So let's see. The acceptance of death, whether jubilant or resigned, signals a repudiation of the moral code modernity has bequeathed us, a commitment to this life as all there is.
Yeah, well, it's just all emotional manipulation.
Yeah, but the thing is, how can you? I mean, again, the fact that she plucks out Hamas in this, and not if she were to, what could have salvaged this somewhat, if she had looked at what if she had also looked at what Netanyahu's regime was doing, or all the stuff that it's not difficult to find out how the daily enforcement of occupation and apartheid in Gaza and the West Bank,
right? And
just some pictures of the settlers and other people celebrating when Palestinians are killed, calling Palestinians babies ticking time bombs, saying that the pregnant women are filled with snakes. Yeah, calls for exterminating them all. That didn't start on October 7th, by the way.
Yeah,
it's this idea that to pluck out Hamas, given what's going on right now, and given the history, and to take it out and totally just take it out of history and context, is I just find it, I don't know, the entitlement to even think you should do this. It's her plaything to make an argument she wants to make about progressive nihilism.
What can you say? There's always been intellectuals like this, and there's always been pseudo-socialists like this. That's how World War I happened. Okay, and the Bolsheviks were one of the few Marxist groups who stood up against it, and that's why these people want to claim their mantle, while at the same time collecting the rewards and the safety of cooperating with their imperialist governments. That's what this type of Marxism and this type of Trotskyism is. It's having it both ways.
Yeah. So I guess we'll leave it there. So anything else you want to? You're not convinced?
No, and I am horrified, and as you are, and again, this confirms, what I've been saying, that most of these sublation people are just they're under the influence, to put it mildly, of the DSA, and the DSA is an annex of the Democratic Party, and when election year rolls around, they fall in line.
Well, actually, that's right. I said that Ashley actually is based in the UK. She's an American citizen, but she's based in the UK. Or at least she was. She left her job. I think she was in. I can't remember what university she was teaching here. She was an assistant professor, I think, maybe an associate one. But she left. She wasn't fired. She left because she's going to, I guess, dedicate herself full time to sharing her thoughts like these with a broader audience.
Yeah.
All right. Well,
there's
Garrett.
unfortunately I won't say there's a huge audience for it, but for some reason there's a big market for it, which because people put up the money for publications like Compact, who do sometimes publish good stuff, but
I think they're more, aren't they, like economically progressive but socially conservative? I can't remember, but they have a variety of people. They have their regular editorial stuff, obviously, and their guest writers. So it's kind of a bit, I don't know, but I
guess they consider Zionism to be part of social conservatism, but as I've said, I consider Zionism to be the blueprint for wokeness. I could consider it to be identity politics. I consider it to be cultural nationalism as a substitute for revolution.
And on that's a good segue, because Garrett is going to join us again, or me, I should say us, but it could be my co-host. He's more open on the weekends. I think we agreed on Thursday. This Thursday, we'll talk anyway. But sometime soon, Garrett's going to come back to again, and we're going to talk about his Substack article on cultural nationalism that touches upon this. The article was more in reference, or the inspiration, I should say, for that article was the argument between Cornel West and Jimmy Dore on his podcast over, we could say, class first politics or identity politics.
Right.
Garrett goes all the way back and uses the comparison between
him and the Black Panther Party.
And Fred Hampton.
Yes.
But we could also probably have a couple of minutes to talk about how Zionism fits into this, and if Zionism could be the real cultural Marxism, even though we tend to, if we hear Lindsay and Jordan Peterson and other people talk about this cultural Marxism that they think is everywhere, that I usually think it's just in their head, because what they accuse cultural Marxists of is not that people aren't doing it, but I don't see the Marxists doing it.
Right.
But
right.
Maybe the target is awry. Maybe Zionism is the real cultural Marxism. I don't know, but I like asking those provocative questions, and it didn't come from me, Garrett. I'm going to out Garrett now. Garrett brought that up in our pre podcast chat, so I'm not going to steal his thunder. That was a Garrett question.
Right. Well,
it's like go.
My position is that which is labeled as cultural Marxism actually has its roots in identity politics, which is cultural nationalism, and Zionism is a form of cultural nationalism.
Okay, well, here we go. We're at 1 hour and 48 minutes. We finished with Ashley's article, but we haven't done the second part of Catrone's. Should we wrap it up, or do you want to?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah?
Yeah, I should go soon.
Yeah, okay, that's fine. It's just more, I mean, yeah. Okay, so anyway, Garrett, thank you again for joining me and going through Ashley's interesting take. It was an unexpected capitalization of the human tragedy currently underway in Gaza that we're watching before our eyes, and with our government and being able more than anybody, the U.S. government, Joe Biden, whoever could pull the plug on this, but they don't seem to want to do that. Anyway, thank you very much.
Thank you for having me, Tara.
And Garrett will be back on sometimes late this week or early next week to talk about cultural nationalism in relationship to identity politics and some of the themes we've been talking about this week. But it'll be it won't be Israel Palestine focused or Hamas condemn, don't condemn. We'll move on to other things, which I'm looking forward to. So Garrett, thank you very much. And You're starting to be a guest of the show, shall we say?
A second banana.
No, 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 no. I'm trying to recruit you. Anyway, thank you, and see you next time.
You too.
Bye. All right, everybody. Thanks for joining us on the Morbid Symptoms podcast. And please follow on X at Morbid Symptoms. It's down there in the bottom corner. And there's also on X my link tree, or my link tree is down here at the bottom if you want to support this podcast or the sister Substack. Please do so. And we'll wrap it up. See you next time. Thank you.